don't need a high-end designer or a lot of money to get a luxe look. Be your own interior designer.
This is Affordable Interior Design, the podcast.
Here's your host, Betsy Helmuth.
We have got so much to discuss that I'm going to skip the small talk and we're going to dive right in this week. I'm going to answer 2 questions from the mailbag, and then I'm going to talk about Hulu's Mr. and Mrs. Murder. It was a fascinating true crime documentary. If you haven't seen it, I'll talk a little bit about it and maybe get you interested in tuning in yourself, because it's interesting. And since I watched that documentary, I've gone down a bit of a rabbit hole, and I've been listening to interviews that one of the wives has been doing on different podcasts and getting her take and hearing it outside of a documentary kind of platform and more off the cuff, more just answering questions in a conversational manner, has been illuminating as well. Lots of thoughts and feelings. Without further ado, here we go. My first question comes from Amelia, and Amelia writes from Goshen. Now, Goshen could be any which where. We have a Connecticut Goshen, there's a New York Goshen, there's probably lots of different Goshens. But anyway, we won't know. It's just a mystery. And Amelia writes, Betsy, I love interior design as a hobby. I listen to podcasts, read DIY books, and more. I once heard you mention a particular line of paint colors that you prefer from Benjamin Moore. Could you refresh my memory as to the current name of that line? Yes, I most certainly can. Hold on, I'm just scrolling through my own paint fan. I love Benjamin Moore paints. It's what I use exclusively. I like it because most contractors use it. I like it because it's most widely available, not even just nationally, but also internationally. And so when I speak in Benjamin Moore colors, not only are most people going to understand what I'm talking about or be able to sample those themselves, but also, I know their lines backwards and forwards, the different finishes, etc. When I'm picking paints for a new space, I love to consider the historical colors. So Benjamin Moore has this line of paints. The code starts with HC. So you look at the paint name and then you look at the code, and it's HC, standing for historical colors. I love to use historical colors in historical spaces. If you Google the different colors, each one does have a story that's tied to some sort of history or some sort of historical marker, which I love. But I find them to be richer, more complex colors as well. So for those of you who are familiar with Farrow and Ball, I love their paints, but the price point is so out of reach. It's really expensive, even though the quality of the product and the richness of the colors is just unbeatable. But I find that Benjamin Moore is a close second. And when I'm looking for that surefire winner, when I don't want to mess around, when I want a color that maybe I'm taking a chance by picking a yellow or even a green or even kind of an orangey color, but I don't want to make a misstep, I'll go to the historical colors. I know that even if it's a little bit different than the shade I was thinking of, it will still be complex and interesting and designerly. You cannot go wrong with their historical colors. And I find myself there time and time again, not just for historical homes, by the way, for any home where I'm choosing sort of an outside of the box color, but I want that guarantee that it's going to be sophisticated. All right, that was an easy question, Amelia. Let me go to a more complex question. This one comes from Samantha. Samantha is writing from Conway, South Carolina. She writes, Hi, Betsy. Thank you so much for your podcast. Recently, my husband and I purchased a 1990s Craftsman River house that is in need of renovations. We are starting small because we are selling a home in a different city. This first room we are going to tackle is the family room. My design style is elegant retreat. When you walk into the house, the stairs are directly in front of you and the family room is to the left, dining room to the right. I wanted to get your opinion on doing built-ins on the only full wall. Should I worry that this is the only windowless wall and it will limit us in the future? The furniture is not my favorite, but we need something for now. I do not want a TV above the sad electric fireplace that we're going to be replacing. We do not have another TV room, and our 5 grown children enjoy popping in and watching games, movies, shows, etc. Also, I don't love that when you walk in, the first thing you see is the TV. Included in the pictures of my room is also an inspiration photo of the type of built-ins we're considering. We will probably be in this house at least 20 years. Note, I plan on doing floor to ceiling curtains, doing something with the mantle, maybe sanding and staining a fun color, replacing the rug, adding a proper size coffee table, and possibly a chair if it won't be too crowded. The interior doors are painted navy blue, which we will probably leave. My husband would like to paint the walls gray and leave the trim white. Eventually, we're also going to have to replace the flooring. Oh my gosh. Well, you have your work cut out for you, Samantha, and I'm glad I'm able to help with just one small piece today. The piece you're wanting to be consider is this built-in. Now, guys, you want to be reading along, watching along on our YouTube channel. Go to Uploft Interior Design on YouTube. You're going to see pictures of this charming South Carolina house. You're going to get an even more full understanding of what's going on. My words can only describe so much. It is true what they say. A picture says 1,000 words, and I'm going to say a couple thousand during the course of this podcast, but you won't get the same feel and understanding that you will if you just log on and check it out. Well, I am very excited. This place looks so charming. It has such amazing curb appeal from the outside. Now, you mentioned that you have one unbroken wall in this space that has no windows. And right now, that's where the TV is on a very small stand. So let me give a tour, even though you did a nice job. When you walk in, the family room is to the left, and it is where you currently have a TV. Looking like right, if you're in the entryway facing the family room, you're going to see that electric fireplace with a mantle above it, and it looks to be shiplap behind the mantle on that wall. And then that fireplace is flanked by two beautiful windows. As we move ourselves around the room, we've got the TV wall. That's where the TV currently is, that long unbroken wall. Then, if we're keeping in our clockwise orientation, that third wall, if you will, is totally open and torn down. And so it's quite open to the staircase. Moving around the space and rounding it out with that fourth wall, the wall that shares the wall with the entry door, we've got another two show-stopping windows. Now, I am open to your idea of a built-in, and I really like the inspiration picture that you sent with cabinets on the bottom. And in this case, the cabinets are painted white. And then there's kind of a wood topper on top that extends the entire length of that wall. And then similarly, in the same finish of wood, we've got floating shelves that have a little illumination below them and have a TV in the middle. I like it. I think it makes good use of that wall, and you have very little wall space because of these beautiful windows and the fireplace, and because that one side is completely open. My only hesitation is that I don't love that when we are facing the TV, we aren't looking out any windows. So, kind of the focal point, the contemporary focal point of the room would be the TV. And when you're looking there, not only is your back to the main point of access to that entryway, which is bad feng shui, which makes you feel vulnerable and wonder who's behind you, but then I'm just staring at a wall with a TV and a built-in and some bookshelves rather than looking out these beautiful windows that appear to have a pretty nice view. But there really is no other good place on the other walls besides above the fireplace for a TV. And if you're absolutely sure you don't want to put the TV above the fireplace, you have a lot of depth in this room. More depth than you're using, because I think you could pull that sofa back another 12 inches, but I can't really see that walkway to ensure that that makes sense. But 12 to 18 inches, in my opinion, you could pull that sofa back and make your living room a little bit bigger. But anyway, if you don't want to put the TV above the fireplace, which I totally understand, I like the idea of the built-in. Now you're going to be limited by the depth of the built-in because on the wall that's perpendicular, you have that window, and the window is pretty close to the corner. I would say there's only about 12 to 15 inches between the windowsill and the corner of the wall, which is going to be quite limiting. Hmm. Hmm. And I think the room does need something tall. So it does need bookshelves of some kind, whether you do floating shelving above the built-in or whether you do freestanding bookshelves. If I lived here, I would not necessarily want to be facing a solid wall. You know what I would do if I lived here? And, don't substitute my judgment for yours. I would move these sofas. You have a sofa, which is opposite the fireplace, back to the entryway, and you have a love seat, which is now in front of the two windows back to the entryway. I would put the love seat with its back against the long unbroken wall. I would put the other sofa perpendicular to it so that it touches and creates like a corner piece. And then I would worry about what to do on the other side, whether it becomes chairs or, bookcase in between the windows or whatever. That way I can see out these beautiful windows. I hate having my back to windows, especially if I'm looking at just a plain wall. I would love to be able to see the primary focal points, the fireplace, which you're replacing in time, the TV, and the windows. And this is how you get it done and make sense of that longer unbroken wall. I feel like it's the better layout, even though that's not the question you're asking me. You're asking me, should you do the built-in? But if you go for my layout, of course, you shouldn't do a built-in. And it would be a lot more affordable and it would offer you more flexibility in the future because I worry, built-ins are not cheap and they really hem you in. Not only to the size of the TV, because the floating shelves are going to be in such a placement that your TV can only get so wide, but also you're going to be really beholden to this layout in which you're blocking two beautiful windows, 50% of the windows in this room, and that bums me out. I want you to evaluate before you commit, and when you do a built-in, that's a big commitment. All right, I hope that helped. Samantha, thank you for sharing this beautiful home with us and keep us posted because I know whatever you do will be fabulous. Okay, let's move on to what I'm binging. What I am binging, what I just finished binging in one night was Hulu's Mr. and Mrs. Murderer. Now, it's a 17-year-long mystery of the disappearance of Mike Williams. This happened in Florida, and he and his wife, Mike and his wife, were friends with Brian and his wife. And they'd been friends for many years. All four of them had sort of known of each other since a couple of them elementary school, a couple of them junior high. What I'm trying to say is they had a long history together. So Brian and Mike go out alligator fishing or hunting, duck hunting, okay? And then Mike does not come back. And Brian says that it was an alligator attack. So during the hunting trip, Brian had tried to save them. Mike was attacked by an alligator. He died. There were clothes planted at the scene, but other than that, nothing was there. It seemed very suspicious because it was winter time in Florida, and apparently the alligators don't attack at that time. The mom of Mike always felt like something was suspicious. And then Brian, the survivor of the hunting trip, who found and reported Mike being devoured, but there was no remains from Mike after the alligator attack, Brian comes home to his wife and is a little bit suspicious. So already Brian's wife is like, I don't know. And already Mike's wife is not as upset as she should be. Let's put it that way. So for nearly 20 years, the police believed that alligators really did attack and eat Mike, even though there was no real physical evidence. And even though Mike's mom was lobbying every which way she could, saying, hey, alligators don't come out in the winter in this way. They're not aggressive like that. Hey, let me point some other issues in the storyline. And then this twist that Brian has convinced Mike to get an extra life insurance policy. So in addition to the $750,000 life insurance policy he already had, Brian convinces Mike to get an additional $1 million of coverage. So that was just sort of something of note. But again, it flew well under the police radar for nearly 20 years. Well, then Brian and Mike's wife get in a relationship, are having an affair. Brian leaves his wife, and Brian is now in a relationship with Mike's wife, and ultimately they get married. So Brian's ex-wife, Kathy, is now on her own, and she's observing Brian, her ex-husband, with her former best friend, Denise, and is like, something's going on there. Like they're in cahoots, they're covering something, something's weird. Well, by this time, Kathy is not talking to Denise because Denise ran off with her husband. So they are no longer friends. But Kathy and Mike's mom refuse to let this case go cold. They know that something is rotten in the state of Denmark, and they have a feeling, a hunch, that Brian and Denise are behind this. So Kathy knows that Brian is a dog and that Denise is going to get sick of him. Even though they are happily married right now, she is going to realize that he's a problem. She's going to divorce him. And sure enough, Kathy gets back into Denise's good graces, pretends that all is forgiven, and is told by a detective that the only way to get Brian or Denise to confess is to break up their relationship, which Kathy manages to do. So Kathy, even though she's moved on and has a new relationship and she has children she has to take care of and all these other things, she spends a lot of her free time trying to break up Brian and Denise, and ultimately it works. Ultimately, they do turn on each other. Ultimately, they do both wind up in jail for different things. Eventually, Brian, who is probably the main perpetrator, gets off on lesser charges, but Denise is still in jail to this day. It gets very complicated. Ultimately, Brian kidnaps Denise, blah, blah, blah. What I'm trying to say with all those blahs is that you must watch this story to believe it. You must go to Hulu because not every true crime story catches my attention or holds my attention. I try and watch them all, but sometimes I get 10 minutes in and I'm like, nope, not for me, AKA Trophy Wives. Can't do it. But this one captivated me. There were turns and twists I did not see. And like I said, I've been going down a rabbit hole with Kathy, who continues to talk, continues to share new angles of her story on different podcasts, including the Kate Casey podcast. If you haven't listened to that one, it's a must, Kate Casey podcast. And I have just learned so much more, become so much more intrigued. And also, I'm just intrigued with Kathy. Like, who spends that much time away from their own family with no police support, doing such risky business as trying to ingratiate yourself to a killer who stole your husband? What? Yeah, you don't want to miss that one. All right, guys, so much to watch, so little time. Go tune into Hulu, and I'll be right back with you next week with another show you absolutely must binge. Until then, bye. A big thank you to our amazing producer, Catherine Heller, to Aton and the MBCR House Band, and to Affordable Interior Design, the sponsor of this podcast and the premier place to get an amazing look on a budget. Check out affordableinteriordesign.com. If you guys love the show, the very best way to support us is by spreading the word. Tell your friends or write us an awesome review on iTunes. So until next week, guys, thanks so much for joining us, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.